Jillian, can you hear me? Jillian, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me? Great.
There was some wind type noise behind you.
I am in like a public meeting room at the library, so it might just be background noise, so I'll stay on
Okay.
mute.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. I think the only other panelist we're expecting is Ray, so they're not on, are they? Oh, Ray is here. Okay.
Yeah, Ray's here.
So Maria and Gustavo will not be joining us today, so we can go ahead and start.
Okay. Excellent. Let me see if I can get my view right.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, sorry, I'm having some audio issues. All right, great, thanks.
No worries. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Labor and Workforce Development Agency AB 2849 Worker Ownership Study Panel meeting. Today is November 20th, 2024, and glad to be here. Thank you all for your graciousness while I was on medical leave. Let's call this meeting to order. And I think we need to do a roll call. So I'll go around the horn. Ray Crisatello.
Here. Hi.
Hi. Let's see. We said David Gustavo Medina is out today. Is that correct? Maria Salinas is out today, correct? Okay. Jessica?
Sorry, here?
All right. No worries. And that's it, right? Okay. We have everyone. All right. So the next item then on the agenda is to approve the last meeting's minutes. And so can I get a motion to approve minutes for the August or September meeting? August 27th. I apologize. I got to get back in the groove here. The August 27, 2024 meeting minutes. Do I have a, everyone has read their packet. We don't need time to review. Okay. May I have a motion then to approve the August 27 meeting minutes?
Motion to approve the August 27th meeting minutes.
Okay. Second. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Ray. All right. Having been moved, do we have do I need to do a roll call? Remind me on the vote, Jillian. Do I need, or is it just, can we do a simple remind me?
I think today it doesn't really matter since it's just the three of you.
Okay.
But yeah, and then we also need to approve the agenda for today.
Oh, sorry. Out of order. I apologize. All right. Well, since the motion is already on the floor, is it okay if we do the minutes out of order, Jillian, or do I need to go backward? All right. So all in favor of approving the meeting minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so it looks like the meeting minutes are approved. Now let me step back and go to the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting?
I'll move to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
Thank you, Jessica. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Ray. All in favor of approving the meeting agenda for today? Please
Aye.
say aye. All right, aye. All right, so the agenda is approved. So I think we move our next item to the study draft discussion and public comment responses. So I think I will turn that over to you, Dr. Levine.
Thank you very much. I think you can see my screen. So it's been over a year we've been presenting this report as it's grown piece by piece. I won't review the whole report, but focus on the changes. Yeah, it's 300 pages. I'll be focusing a lot on the policies to promote high road worker-owned firms and some of our analysis of staffing co-ops, the parts that have changed the most. Before I get there, I just want to say the public and the panel, especially Ray, have given us just tremendously detailed and helpful feedback. And everyone on the team is grateful for all of the guidance and citations and critiques we have received. The two biggest changes, I said, has been completing a chapter that was always intended but took a long time, was expert interviews with stakeholders in umbrella groups that provide services to lots of co-ops or worker-owned firms, and also more detailed study of some case studies of cooperative labor contracting. We did a few detailed studies, but we expanded the list a little bit more shallowly, but to look at several others. And then the biggest changes in the report has been thinking more about what we can do to promote association of co-ops or in general associations and umbrella groups that support high road worker ownership. And coming back to something that we mentioned briefly, but thinking about procurement advantages for the state for high road worker ownership. I'm not going to discuss every change that the reviewers at LWDA, at the panel and elsewhere have talked about the reports, talking about unions, lots of clarifying, explaining more clearly future research. And I'll just say, if you said something was unclear, we clarified it. There was never any disagreement. If you said we need a citation, we always cited it, and so forth. it turns out it takes several weeks to give you a copy to review before this meeting. We only sent it a few hours ago, so we will continue to appreciate feedback, but you haven't had a chance, obviously, to review each change we made in the report. So a question for our study of these staffing agencies that are employee-owned, worker-owned, is can these staffing co-ops scale? And what we see is an enormous growth of informal and formal but temporary, or permanent but contracted out, all these variations of staffing providers, disproportionately providing employment, if imperfect employment in some cases, for people in groups that are historically disadvantaged, women, immigrants, people of color. So we have reason to think that employee ownership can help people working in low-wage sectors. And the question is, can worker-owned staffing co-ops create high-quality jobs? And to do this, they're going to need a business model, which often means providing high-quality services for clients, so they can both attract worker owners and attract clients to scale their business. So we identified a number of worker-owned, or aspiring to be worker-owned in some case, staffing co-ops, and a number of umbrella groups. Umbrella group is this vague term referring to organizations that could be a co-op of co-ops, or an NGO, or some interesting hybrid that provides services to lots of co-ops. Sometimes in the staffing world, this would be back office support, for example. But these tend to be either in the startup and conversion side of things, or in the supporting worker-owned firms while they're in operations, for example. And we tried to understand, for both the staffing agencies and the umbrella groups, what their goals were, what their business model was to reach scale, and whether they're reaching scale. The staffing co-ops we looked at had a hard time reaching scale. They can recruit workers by providing services to employees like health insurance, but they really had a hard time creating a sense of worker ownership. That cohesion when workers are dispersed in space is just really hard to get started. And so we didn't see these co-ops growing to scale, even though they each, had found a niche that gave them hope they could. There was a partial exception, which is very far from the US. Siwa is an enormous umbrella group of women in India, and their home care agency has grown to a meaningful scale. It's not a big company, but they have shown promise. The thing about this sector is that existing agencies charge an enormous markup. So Siwa, the Self-Employed Women Association version of this, can lower their markup and create an opportunity for women to get much higher pay, but customers are not paying higher wages. Siwa is an interesting example because their home co-op is part of this broader umbrella group. And we'll come back to saying these umbrella groups seem really important. So in almost all the co-ops we've looked at it, and to be honest, most that we know about participate in some sort of network or association, or have an NGO, a community-based organization that sponsors them. So we profiled Up and Go, which is a network of co-ops for people cleaning houses, and they have a umbrella group in New York City, the Center for Family Life. And it looks like these umbrella groups are really important because co-ops often are quite small, and having something that can provide shared services, whether it's the website or HR policies or purchasing, seems quite useful. It also means you have economies of scale in creating training materials and building these skills of ownership. Often the umbrella groups and the co-ops are not particularly independent. So in Siwa, the home care, has the same name as Siwa, as the Self-Employed Women Association. Up and Go, as I said, is this network of co-ops. They're sort of interesting because they're shifting from an umbrella group to becoming an integrated co-op group. Since each of the cleaning co-ops was quite small. In California, we did a pretty detailed case study of Courage Home Care Co-op. And this is part of a co-op of co-ops, Elevate, that's incubating these little home care co-ops around the country. And the most famous in the world of employee ownership, if you stick around worker ownership long enough, you'll get sick of hearing about them. They're so famous. But Mondragon is a very successful network, a conglomerate of co-ops. And a few of them are doing staffing and subcontracting. Again, mostly subcontracting, not so much staffing and temp work. But Mondragon is very famous for the economies of scale in training, providing capital through their own bank. If you want to create longer term jobs, which we said was important in employee ownership, Mondragon co-ops that are shrinking or have bad years sometimes lend employees to other co-ops. So Mondragon is it's an exceptional example. No one else has replicated their model, but also a really important one, showing that there is a possibility to have these economies of scale and scope.
Excuse me, Dr. Levine.
Yeah.
Is it possible to make those slides larger?
So I figured out for myself, sorry, this is Lisa, I'm off camera. If you click on the 3 dots by David L's screen, you can change the zoom ratio on your own computer. So I have it at original size, and then you have to scroll down slightly, but it works much better for me.
The
Yeah,
other
I'm
thing
sorry.
is if David shares the window instead of sharing the screen.
Oh, okay, that might work too.
Awesome.
That is not one of my choices, I don't think.
Under share, it should give you all of your windows in addition to both your
Does
screen.
this look any, oh, I know. No, it keeps,
David, if you reduce the height of that window and
I can't. I made it smaller, and then when it goes to slideshow, it goes to full screen. Let's, is this, we'll try one more thing. Sorry about this. This is better?
yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. But I'm going pretty quickly here to describe, organizations in India and Spain, as well as a bunch in the United States. The bottom line, what I want you to take from this is that employee ownership succeeds in all sorts of niches. It's really hard to find it in the closer you get to temp agencies, the harder it is to create worker ownership for reasons we've been discussing over the past year. That worker ownership works when employees form a cohesive group and can encourage each other to work hard and come up with good ideas, and you can empower them to take management roles. And that's just really hard when people are dispersed. And this exception of the home care in India just shows, look, if there's, workers are only getting 20% of the pay, there's a lot of of room for employee ownership to create value even without a ton of cohesion. But in most markets, we're just not seeing staffing agencies. At the same time, there's lots of other forms of contracting where workers are working together, co-located for persistent amounts of time. And employee ownership is a perfectly good match with those forms of contracting. Whether we're talking about contracting or almost any form of ownership, what I want you to take away is that these umbrella groups to help in the founding or converting, and then in many cases to help in operations, doing services, whether it's training or IT or whatever, that has economies of scale, these seem really important. So we've extended our policy proposals in two important directions. One is thinking about grant programs for these umbrella groups, and the other is something about state procurement. As you all know, the ACLC was designed to address a lot of very important goals about improving job quality, which is partly about compensation, but it's partly, and particularly in low-wage parts of the economy, about dignity and respect, particularly for historically disadvantaged groups of workers. Creating a formal employment, so regulations, unionization, and so forth become much more feasible. The ACLC, by its name, the Association of Cooperative Labor Contractors, is focusing on these labor contractors, which is, again, this big set of organizations. And what I want to focus on, and again, we've mentioned in the past, is that thinking about, temp workers is probably a tough audience, but there are lots of other types of subcontractors, right? There are cafeteria workers in a large office are, co-located, they work together, they have potentially permanent jobs. And this is a classic example of the fissured workplace. They're often not an employee of the big company that they're serving the employee meals to. But when you think about, well, we should think about promoting worker ownership in these subcontractors, I just think, well, that says you should think about any workplace where the customers have high ability to pay, not just a subcontractor. These folks do have normal employment W-2s. It's not that somehow they're avoiding regulations the way some temp workers or quote unquote independent contractors are. So this, organizing cafeteria workers into either a union or an employee-owned co-op or something isn't about formalizing the employment relationship, but it is a perfectly good place to think about promoting employee ownership. But once you start thinking about, well, if we're not focused on labor contractors, meaning temp workers, then it comes to the team, I think, said at that point, we're really just saying an association of cooperatives, the AC part of ACLC, we would like to provide these services that co-ops find valuable, regardless of the sector, as long as they're creating these high quality jobs. So when we think about umbrella groups, the AC part of ACLC, they can be very important for startups and conversions. Is this business a good candidate either to start a co-op or to convert to a co-op or any other high road form of worker ownership? If this is a good candidate, can we help them work out the spreadsheet? How much capital can they afford to borrow? Who might provide that capital? And then again, there's these two parts, the starting part and the operating part. Training workers in how to read the books of open book management in workplace democracy, these are going to be very similar set of skills for lots of different businesses, lots of co-ops. And in many sectors, having these back office services, right? If, to the extent you're doing house cleaning in New York or something, in the up and go example I talked about a minute ago, you want to have a really good website and a really good app, for example, and those sorts of things. You don't want every little co-op creating their own. So we've come down with the proposal that there could be a grant program for this association of co-ops, or more generally, umbrella groups promoting high road worker ownership. I asked AI to create me a logo, and I didn't think it did a very good job, but I stuck it on because it amused me. Late at night, I do very low value work. So should this umbrella group be for nonprofits, for what are called secondary co-ops, a co-op owned by a network of co-ops? I think our answer is it should be open to anyone. It can be, you know, a lot of funds can go for umbrella groups with a track record of success, but also, you know, seed grants for starting up new umbrella groups that have reason to think they're promising. If the state does decide to consider this, we encourage them to consider prioritizing, if there's some sort of point system, if the sector is a place with a lot of low-income folks and people from disadvantaged groups, if the co-ops are meeting more of our criteria for what we meant by a high road co-op or high road worker ownership. These are, again, process points like open book management, required items like employees elect the board, and employees own a majority, process points like this open book management or high levels of training, and then outcome, if it's paying good compensation and benefits compared to its sector. Some mix of those is what we proposed. And also, and there's a tension here, if we focus on low-wage sectors, is that we think there's a business model to grow, that there are customers with some ability to pay. And so this could be, you know, you're a contractor cafeteria for really big, rich companies in Silicon Valley. You have clients who really value quality. So if in home care, employee owners tend to persist in the job to have lower turnover, and that's really valuable, but not that many clients can pay more than the market rate since home care is expensive. If you have an anchor customer, a hospital that really wants to work with worker-owned vendors and so forth. So we're not saying these would be requirements, but just, you know, the more of these an umbrella group says that credibly says they're going to be serving, the more likely it is to meet the goals of the state. And again, exactly what services to provide, we just say the services can be for incubation, growing new ones. This can be a franchise model. In California, there are as many bakeries, sort of create more bakeries in places. Technical assistance providers. In operations, it can be sort of a vertical conglomerate. So I've mentioned Namaste Solar, where some are doing installation, some are doing credit, some are doing maintenance. It can be back office and so forth. This would be a fine time to stop for questions, or I can just keep going. I'll just keep going. The second new policy we've added is targeted procurement advantage for high road worker ownership. If you want to do a procurement process and you're worried about corruption, the easiest thing to do is to make a bunch of really complicated rules that say specify exactly what you want and then just get the lowest price bidder. And government procurement rules are more complicated than that, but there's a very strong favoritism towards low price and a real challenge of saying, we care about quality, but we can't specify exactly what we mean. We can specify exactly what we mean, we stick in the contract, but it's hard to write that perfectly. And so the government often ends up with a challenge where they get low price and low quality. So the quality adjusted price is not so good. If you knew that this was a workplace where workers were really committed to the job, where they had high skills, where they all had incentives to spot problems and solve problems for customers, well, you as any customer should be willing to pay more for that sort of supplier. And so I think it was North Carolina just passed an incentive for the state to buy from ESOPs. I don't think promoting an incentive for any worker ownership makes sense because they're not all providing necessarily high quality. But if you have these certification for what we're calling as high road worker ownership, where their workers truly are empowered, where they are getting higher skills and making more decisions, then we think if the state pays a little bit extra, quality adjusted, they're probably saving money. And so this requires the state to have some way of certifying not employee ownership, which is relatively easy to measure, but this more complicated idea of high road worker ownership. And say once, if you have that certification, then a modest procurement advantage looks like it'll cost the state. Look, they're willing to accept a 3% higher bid from this bidder, but when you adjust for quality, it's quite likely they'll be breaking even or saving money and providing above average job quality. I'll just briefly describe, I mean, we had hundreds of tiny changes, but as folks requested, we have much more description of both Mondragon and other umbrella groups, as I said. We've talked more about how these cooperative labor contractors interact with unions. We defended some of our claims that we made that were either lacking a citation or not explained well. Joseph Blasi at Rutgers and Ray, who's on this panel, gave lots of specific suggestions on things like citations and points to make, and we're grateful to them. But we supported a lot of our citations that were weak. I hope we did a good job about specifying whether something was about co-ops, ESOPs with majority worker ownership, democratic ESOPs, high road versions of ownership. These concepts are different. There's some overlap, but they are not interchangeable, and we've tried to be more careful. And a few other points. I won't bother specifying detail. I'll mention, I've said nothing but thank you, and yes, we made all the changes. There are 2 points, there are a few points where I want to say we were not entirely able to respond in the way reviewers wanted. The paper fails to concretely analyze how the Association of Cooperative Labor Contractors contribute to union jobs, benefit Black workers, racial wage gap, shift power to workers. And these are important goals, but we do discuss how the ACLC interacts with unionization. We do expand our literature review to talk a little bit more about ownership and how it interacts with unions, minorities. But fundamentally, we don't explain how there are big benefits because that's not what we think that the literature supports, nor our own research and case studies that addressing the wage and wealth gaps and so forth are extremely important goals. We just didn't see a mapping between support for the ACLC and achieving those goals. So on 95% of points, we were responsive. On one important point, there is a disagreement. early in the, a year ago, the panel made clear that they did want us to study ESOPs, that they were interested in conversions. Some reviewers were not interested in that, in those sectors. But look, we did. The panel asked us, we did the work, and so we're reporting on it. The point about ESOPs, I just wanted to make clear. To a first approximation, almost all employee ownership in the US is through ESOPs. And to a first approximation, or to a second approximation, very little of it has to do with democratic high road workplaces. Because the vast majority of the 10 million or so ESOP members, it's just a small part of their retirement, or maybe a large part of their retirement, but it's not affecting the organizational work. With that said, about 10% of ESOPs, so roughly 1 million workers, are in majority-owned ESOPs, usually 100%, and a substantial share of those are democratic in meaningful ways. They're all democratic on paper, but a substantial share are democratic. So, if we just look at majority-owned, it's about 100 ESOP employees in a majority-owned ESOP for each co-op employee in a worker co-op. So we really, now not all majority-owned ESOPs are democratic, but still, the 100-to-1 factor says that we think it would be irresponsible not to pay attention to ESOPs, because the question is, how do you create good jobs? The legal form of employee-owned trust, or employee stock ownership plan, or co-op, or various hybrids. I was privileged to learn the word ESOPerative, I think it was. I think in some sense that's a nuance. Lots of legal forms can be used to achieve lack of democratic worker ownership, and lots of legal forms can be used to create democratic and high road worker ownership. So I think it's quite important that we include these ESOPs are very widespread, as well as employee ownership trusts, which are much less common than ESOPs, but still of growing importance in what we're doing. So in conclusion, we greatly appreciate the detailed feedback from lots of folks on this call. We made lots of responsive changes. We didn't change a few things that are important, some because other people in the panel said otherwise, and some because we come to different conclusions. And I appreciate the feedback finally on the slides, getting those to be readable. So panel, it's now your guys' turn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Levine, for reviewing those slides with us. And I will open it up to the panel for discussion.
Just really quickly, I wanted to say as well, if anyone in the public would like to submit questions through Q&A, you can go ahead and start doing that, and I will read them out at the right time. And
just for the public, you can't imagine how terrifying it was when I found these would be public meetings, because I didn't know the internet, not everyone is that helpful. And it's 100% helpful. I've received comments, so please keep them coming. My fears were entirely unwarranted. It turns out everyone on the internet is both nice and super well informed. Who knew? At least LWDA is part of the internet.
Well, I'll just jump in to say thank you so much. It's really, yeah, you and the other folks on the team really have been wonderful in doing what I'm sure feels like extra work, but having taken our feedback sincerely, like I'm really grateful. And the slides you just outlined seem, they really seem wonderful to me. So I'm excited to read the fleshed out report.
And this LWDA received it, as I said, a few minutes ago, maybe 2 hours. I don't know how long
yes,
they
so
take to process.
Yeah, so we are in the process of posting it on our website so that the public can also see and comment on it. And I guess I'll just ask this now. because Lisa, since you're on, am I able to send it to the panelists before it's posted on the website?
We can hear you, Lisa.
I need to not only go on camera, but mute. The unmuting being the more important of the two. So there's no problem in principle with sending it to the panel before it's posted on the website, in as much as it's probably not technologically feasible to simultaneously post it, but you should do it soon, you know, as soon as possible thereafter. And if it's possible to have some kind of access to it through the Zoom broadcast, that would be great. But
Okay, so with that said, I will send it to the panelists right now. I'll type out the email, and it's in the process of being posted to our website. So it'll be posted probably by tomorrow.
Excuse me, Jillian, we had one typo we discovered in an acknowledgement that we do want to get fixed, and I will get that to you within the hour, okay?
Okay,
I'll
thanks.
get you fresh files within the hour.
Jillian, in the event anyone in the public asks for it, you could also send it to them directly in the meantime while it's being posted.
Okay, I also want to just put it out there that we updated our LWDA webpage with, at the top, it now shows the email address that public comment can be submitted. So for anyone watching this, you can go ahead and look there for the email address. I check it every day, so.
So I'd like to ask a question, Dr. Levine. Could you reference the slide that talked about the gaps, where it doesn't lead to union jobs, doesn't benefit Black workers, and what was the third one? Could you just maybe explain to me, and I'm sorry if this was discussed in any way while I was out, but what does make a connection? I heard you very clearly say that the scope as defined doesn't make a connection, but did you learn anything through this process that could inform us on maybe how we make a connection or address those gaps in the future?
What a fantastic question. I'll give a small answer and try and invent a big answer. I keep coming back to this phrase you've heard me use over the last year about workplaces where all the employees have the skills and the incentives and the power to spot and solve problems. And this is what every political party and every religious organization and every union wants as well. A bunch of people who know how to work together in a diverse group to spot and prioritize and solve problems. So I think anything the state does in the schooling system, in the training system, in the retraining system, promoting worker centers or unions or companies that are providing these skills, I think is really valuable. And that historically, students coming, from the elite part of the public education system, I teach it at Berkeley or high schools in prosperous suburbs and so forth, are getting more of these skills. And students going to less prosperous schools and attending colleges that are very focused on, we're going to give you these trade skills, are not spending as much time on these crucial skills. So I would say just the big picture is making sure that anything we do that touches our citizens is building these schools, that a diverse group of them can come together. They know how to work together the little skills like how to make a budget, or the medium-sized skills, how do you negotiate with other stakeholders? And the big skills, how do we, who needs to be involved in solving this problem? How do we engage them? The skills, I don't know all of you very well, but I'm guessing you spend a lot of your time doing is pulling together a diverse group to identify big problems and solve them. And make sure everyone in the state has those skills. And that when there are workplaces, whether worker owned or not, where the workers have that autonomy and have those skills and have those incentives. And obviously worker ownership is a great way to create those incentives in many cases. That the state is able to promote those. I talked about certifying those sorts of workplaces because you probably want your auto repair, and your company probably wants to contract with a food service provider, and a car company wants to get their components built by suppliers that have these whose workers have these skills and incentives, and the work is organized where they're actually empowered to fix problems. So that's a long and rambling answer, but I think most of the low-wage part of the labor market in California and around the world is full of people often being treated with very low respect and given very little autonomy and skill, very little opportunity to use skills they have in solving problems. And we'd like to create a world where people have a lot more control over their lives, including their lives at work. And to the extent that the incentives are lined up in a way that ownership often facilitates, so they have incentives to solve problems for customers, there's a real business model there as well as a equity agenda and a social justice agenda. I had not prepared that long answer. I'm sorry, I rambled and repeated a bit, but
no worries. No worries. Thank you for addressing it. Are there any other questions from panel members or the public, Jillian?
So can I just get clear on process? We're about to see the revised version, and then we are going to reconvene in December to approve that, and then that's the final report.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Yes, so I'm writing that out in the email I'm about to send you with the draft report, but any panelists can submit feedback at any time. It just needs to be posted publicly. So if you communicate with the study team, please CC me so that we can put that on our website. But ideally, the goal would be that in our next meeting, December 17th at 9 a.m., we hold a final vote on the report. And so hopefully we can address any issues before then.
And Jillian, just to confirm, you received the email I just sent you with version 4A? Corrects the typo.
Let's see if I received that. I haven't, but to be honest, I don't have great email connection right now, so I'll hold off on sending it until that email comes in.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And we do have a comment from Adria in the Q&A. She wants to add that adding to what Dr. Levine has shared, the ACLC analysis chapter now includes a discussion of unionization. And that's all the public comment that I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm always disappointed when a meeting ends early, as you can imagine, as I'm sure you all are.
Well, last call for questions on that note. Hearing none, I think our last agenda item is opportunity for panel members to request agenda items for future panel meetings. Any agenda item? Hearing none, we will move to the very last item on the agenda, which is public comment on non-agenda items. Jillian, do we have any public comment in the queue on non-agenda items?
No, we do not.
Okay, hearing none, I think this panel has handled all of its scheduled business, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.